Hey everybody, it's Jeremy with Humble Organics. It is early spring here in Colorado. The snow has finally melted and we are ready to get out and plant our garden. So I've got this raised garden bed behind me. I'm going to plant a whole bunch of different crops in this today. Salad greens, so lettuce, spinach, Asian greens, as well as beets, kohlrabi, Swiss chard, kale. That's all going to go in this bed. And what I want to share with you in this video is some tips for planting seeds in such a way that's going to maximize your yield later on, given that we don't have a whole lot of space in this 12 by 4 foot garden. We are also planting, we're about 6 weeks before the last frost date, which is actually kind of early. Even though these are all cold weather crops, most gardeners would want to wait maybe a couple more weeks in Colorado at least before putting these into the garden. The reason we're able to do this is because we're going to be covering the bed with a hoop tunnel. And so if you're interested in seeing how we do that, you can check out the website. We've got another video that shows you how we make hoop tunnels. Okay, so before we get started, I want to take a look at the back of a seed packet. And what you're going to find on the most seed packets is instructions on planting, so things like depth and spacing. We're going to pretty much ignore everything on the seed packet because often what you're going to find is they're going to tell you to plant your seeds in rows. Right? Maybe you want your rows for lettuce to be 6 or 8 inches apart because that's how far apart you want your mature plants to be in order to have enough space. But those guidelines are really for not for high intensity gardening in really rich soil with raised vegetable garden beds like what we have here. So I want to show you some tips on how we actually plant much more densely, ignoring the guidelines on the seed pack, and we end up getting tons more food out of this garden bed. Okay, so let's take a look at how we do this. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few things that I did to prepare this bed for planting. So I did add some compost and also some organic granular fertilizer to the bed, and then I just sort of turned that into the soil with a shovel and then raked it over so it's nice and smooth. The other thing I did about an hour before planting time is just watered the bed. And you want it so that the soil is going to be moist, but not overly saturated. You don't want it soggy. You still want it to have a little bit of granular texture for planting seeds. Okay, so let's take a look at how we're going to plant these seeds. As I said earlier, we're going to completely ignore the recommendations to plant our seeds in rows. So the traditional row planting method, you know, let's say we're planting lettuce and we want our lettuce plants to be about 6 to 8 inches apart. So we'd put a row here and then we'd measure over 6 inches, put another row here, and we just put the seeds out in these rows. Well, the problem with that is that we've wasted a lot of space because all of this space in between these rows is just wasted. Right? We're not planting anything in there. And we don't need to be walking between these rows because we have a raised garden bed. So all we've done is just waste space. So instead, I want to show you a way that we can plant to maximize yield. Okay, so let's get rid of these rows. And instead, I want you to think about your garden bed in sections instead of in rows. Okay, so I am going to line out a section where I'm going to plant some, in this case, I think I'll plant some Asian greens and arugula in this section. So between here and the edge of the bed, I'm going to plant. And I'm not going to line them out in rows. I'm just going to scatter seeds all over this section. And what we can do as these plants grow and get bigger, we can thin the seedlings as they grow and use them in salads. Okay, so now we've not wasted any dead space and we're continually able to harvest, and we get way more yield with this method of gardening than the typical row planting method. And actually we have another video on maximizing garden yields in small spaces if you want to check that out on our website. Okay, so let me show you how we plant in each section. So as I said, in this section here I'm going to plant some Asian greens and arugula. So let's take a look at how we do that. All right, so I've got my seeds here. I'm just going to do a little section. I'm not going to do that entire section with this much seed. You need a couple more handfuls to do that. Because as I said, you want to really plant this densely. And the reason for that, like I said earlier, is that you can pull the plants, thin them as they mature, and use them as baby greens in salads. So to plant something like Asian greens, these are mostly brassicas, and you don't need to plant them very deep. So literally, what I would recommend is just grabbing a handful and sprinkling them densely over the soil. Okay, so I have a bucket of soil handy, so I scooped out this bucket before I prepared the garden because we do need to cover these seeds lightly. So they're brassicas, so they don't need to go very deep, but we want to give them some soil. So I just have this bucket, and nothing scientific about this. You just want to lightly cover that whole area that you just planted with soil, right? Don't need to go very deep. And then I'm just going to pat it down so that the seeds have really good contact with the soil. Okay, so we've done this section here with Asian greens. We'll do some arugula up there. Okay, so we're going to work our way down this bed. In this next section, I want to put lettuce. We eat a lot of lettuce, so I'm actually going to make this section a little bit bigger than the last section. Okay, so again, I'm just going to line it off. That looks good. So between here and here, I'm going to plant lettuce seed. Okay, we're going to do the same kind of broadcast spreading that we did. I'm going to cover it with soil for my bucket lightly. Lettuce needs to be covered very lightly. And then after we're going to basically march our way down this whole bed. Once we've got everything planted, we're going to water the seeds in. So you're going to water to where you don't want standing water in your bed, but you want the soil to be nice and moist. And during the period of time where your seeds are germinating, they do need moisture. Okay, so you're going to need to keep the bed consistently and evenly moist throughout the germination period. You can back off a little bit once the plants actually pop out of the soil, but while the seeds are germinating, you want to give them plenty of water. So that may mean certainly watering once a day at least. You might need to water both in the morning and the evening to make sure you get good rates of germination. Okay, and so it's really as simple as that. We're going to get, as I said, despite the fact this is only a 4x12 bed, we will get a ton of food out of this bed over the course of the growing season.